Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kai, and welcome back to Warframe. As you can see, today we will be taking a look at Saryn, specifically Saren Prime. I've had a couple requests for this Warframe, and I understand why. She is immensely popular and also immensely strong. So, let's go hop into the sim, go over her abilities, and I can show you why that is. Here we are in the sim. Now, before we get started with the build, let's go over Saryn's abilities. The first thing you might notice, which you also probably saw in the title, is yes, this is a Saryn build using Breach Surge. This is not very common, but due to me having actually, used and play tested this build and gone up to an hour in a Steel Path survival with this, this is a phenomenal ability for Saryn, but we'll cover that in a minute. Saryn's first ability is Spores. Spores requires an enemy to be cast on, and when you do, you will do a quick, little short one-handed animation and inflict an enemy with corrosive spores. As you can see, those are what they look like. Now, this does inflict the actual corrosive status onto enemies, which reduces their armor by 80% and is extra effective against ferret armor, which this corrupted heavy gunner happens to possess. Now, it is not a guaranteed corrosive proc. You do need to build for some strength to get a higher status chance per tick, but if you look in the bottom right, you'll see that I have a meter building up, which is the damage that my spores are doing to the target. Now, it says 1 infected right here. You can infect a lot of enemies with this ability. I've seen it go up to 60. People call this space aids for a reason. To easily spread spores, all you have to do is shoot the spores on a target, which looks like this. On shot of the spores, as you can see, every enemy in the area is infected with the corrosive spores. They all now possess those little, like, balls on them, whatever you want to call them. My meter in the bottom right is also building up way faster because the amount of damage buildup you get scales off the amount of enemies that you currently have infected. Obviously, I only can spawn in 20 enemies into the sim, but you can infect a lot of enemies and build up this meter very quickly. The more strength you have, the quicker it builds up. There is a single enemy left now that if I kill her, you will see that I'm starting to lose my spore counter very quick. It is very easy to let this drain very fast, but it is very easy to keep up because all you need to do is cast spores onto another enemy and then, well, there you go. Your counter doesn't reset or anything. It just stays at what it was, but it does decay very fast depending on how much duration you have, and Saren doesn't build for really high duration most of the time. The second ability in this build is Breach Surge. Obviously, this is not Saren's actual ability. This is a helmet ability off of Wisp. Now, this ability is great for a multitude of reasons. On cast of Breach Surge, you will see that you send out some sparks. These sparks then attach onto enemies' heads and blind them. All of these enemies are blinded for however much duration you have, which is really good. If I were to now shoot this enemy, can I get one to go? Okay, that right there, that little spark. There is a 10% chance to release a surge spark in the form of a, like, homing projectile when you shoot an enemy. That right there. And it is a guaranteed chance to send out a surge spark when you kill an enemy, although it is only a 10% when damaging them with weapons. This surge spark adopts the damage of your weapon, seeks the head of another enemy within 10 meters, deals radiation damage equal to the damage dealt to the surged enemy when you shoot them, and then amplifies it by, gives it a damage multiplier, which is scaled off strength and has a 20% status chance. Now, these sparks are actually considered weapon damage, which is great because there means they're affected by things like Eclipse and Vigorous Swap and stuff like that. So you could potentially build into that if you wanted to. We don't here, but just know that that is a possibility. These Surge Sparks also have a critical multiplier of 1.5, and they can get headshots. So these sparks are actually really good because they do a couple things. They, one, CC enemies very well. They're not going to be shooting you at this point because they're blinded. And then when you damage them, you get more damage for free. The Sato is not a great weapon to use since it has such low base damage, but if I use the glaive and then, do some shots out. It does a lot. It's very good. And it scales very nicely with Saren's abilities, as you'll see. Toxic Lash is Saryn's third ability, and this one is actually pretty simple. On cast of Toxic Lash, you will quick animation, and then you will imbue your weapon with toxin damage. This toxin damage does not combine with other elements on your weapons. It just gives you a raw added multiplicative toxin damage at the end. So this is a very good ability that when you build into high strength, really increases the damage output of your weapons and is phenomenal on a weapon like the Sato. What this also does is makes it so that when you cast spores on an enemy, normally you would need to shoot the spores to trigger it, but with Toxic Lash I can shoot here and trigger them regardless, which is very nice for spreading spores because you don't need to aim directly at the enemy to spread them. Or more so, you don't need to aim at the spores to spread them. This effect is also doubled for melee strikes, so that extra damage of 44% would actually be 88% on melees. Saryn's fourth ability is Miasma. Now, Miasma is a really great ability when you really just want to kill everything, because when you proc Miasma, you inflict every enemy around you with viral. It is only a single stack of viral, but it is viral nonetheless. But the main thing that this ability does are actually two things. One, as you can see there, it staggers enemies, and this affects every enemy inside your radius. That stagger is very good. What it also does is when you have spores on an enemy, let's just spread this. Right now our damage is at about 100. If I pop this, you'll see that our damage is a lot higher than the counter actually shows. This is because Miasma quadruples the damage that spores are doing to a target. So when you want to just nuke everything, just cast this. And yeah, you know what? You just it just helps kill things because viral is viral damage and viral damage is good. We've looked at the entire roster of Saryn's abilities. So now let's look at the actual build. Why don't we? And here it is. So as you can see immediately from the aura, this is a shield gating build. This is a common thing to do on Saryn, even with just her base second ability with Molt, because it is an instant cast, instant shield gate. But I'm sorry to break it to you guys, most Steel Path builds are going to involve this in some way if the frame does not have some other means of survivability. Shield gating is just the easiest way to stay alive in Steel Path content without using, cheese like Vazarin's Protective Dash, or just running all survivability mods in things like Adaptation and everything else that just, grants you ridiculous amounts of armor, and like running triple Umbral for Umbral Fiber and Vitality and stuff. Like, it's just not exactly fun. So just building shield gating is the way that I go with a lot of frames. But regardless, let's look at the build. Saryn is a frame that loves range. As you can see here, we are only missing 2 range mods, the main one being Augur Reach and then Cunning Drift. I guess if you want a Forma again, you can throw in here in your X list. That would actually be a pretty good idea. You might want to do that. I only have 1 Forma in my Saren Prime. Now, we have a lot of range. We have just a little bit of duration because we didn't want to go negative duration because Transient Fortitude does remove that, so I just threw in Prime Continuity. Duration affects how long Toxic Lash, Miasma, it affects all of her abilities. Mainly, it affects the decay rate and the reset decay on spores, but you should never really not be affecting an enemy with spores. It's that easy to keep up. Obviously, it's nicer to have a longer duration on Miasma and Toxic Lash and Breach Surge, I guess, but you have to sacrifice a couple things. Now, efficiency at 130. This is because I'm not using flow anywhere here, so we only have 300 energy, and these abilities are not cheap. But at an efficiency of 130, our main survivability in this build is Breach Surge, because it blinds enemies and also spreads radiation to them. And if you didn't know, radiation, its status effect means that enemies will start shooting at each other. So this is our main survivability here. Breach Surge at 35 energy, 130 efficiency, with Brief Respite, 1 Augur mod on your build, and then 2 on your pistol, gives you 150 plus 120, and those two together equal 270. Now, 270% of 35, as I'm sure you can guess, is above 75. This gives you around 80 shields every time you cast Breach Surge, which with a decaying Dragon Key, I think it is, yes, equipped, you only have 75 shields, so you get that full 1.3 second shield gate every time you cast a Breach Surge, along with blinding nearby enemies and proccing them with radiation. 149 strength is here because it affects how much damage we get from Toxic Lash. It affects the damage multiplier on Breach Surge, how much viral damage these do, and how quickly your spores build up. Spores and the Breach Surge and Toxic Lash are the most important one. Miasma is mainly used as a big area-wide stun and multiplier for spores, but strength is still important, which is why I'm running Molt Augmented. Mine is obviously not rank 5, but at rank 5, at 250 kills, you will be getting plus 60% ability strength, and that will put us at 209%, which is a really great spot for Saren to sit. And the Rolling Guard is the only non-stat mod we have in here, just because it's nice for status cleanse. And then right here, I do have Normal Intensify. I would recommend using Umbral Intensify. I actually just can't fit it, but Forma again, and, you know, use Umbral Intensify here, because it is literally just the better version of this. Now, I use the Sado. The Sado is great, because with Saren, you are proccing Corrosive, and specifically on this build, Corrosive, Radiation, Toxin, and Viral. 4 status effects, all different from your 4 abilities. The Sado needs status effects because its damage increases with each status effect afflicting a target. On my Sado, I'm also modded for Viral Heat. I can honestly not use Viral here, but I just have it here because I'm using Hunter Munitions. This is really good because it means that you just get base damage without having to use the Glaive. But the Glaive on the Sado helps to proc Breach Surge multiple times, because this build is so great because Breach Surge does not need to be procced by weapons. If I come up to these enemies here, let me just spawn them in real quick. I'll just get some energy. Looking at these enemies here, let's proc Toxic Lash, Corrosive Spores. Now we'll spread them to every enemy. If I now use Breach Surge, you'll see that the ticks of the spores actually do Breach Surge, like, they spread it. I don't need to shoot them. So, let's just cast Breach Surge again. And now, let's cast Miasma. This is barely any spore damage being built up. And then I can just shoot a Glaive in. One more Miasma cast. And you get, essentially, an infinite rotation of damage because spores never run out on an enemy. And then Breach Surge requires damage to be done to them to spread the radiation procs. And then Miasma multiplies the damage of your spores, which then increases the damage of your Breach Surge because it takes the damage into account and then multiplies it by however much you have based on your strength. It is a very, very synergistic build, and while you're doing all this, every time you cast Breach Surge, you're getting very hard CC with a lot of range. Since this is a 235 range build, you're getting your shield gate back. You're getting another status proc for your Sado. It's, like, really, really good. And then for Acolyte killing, I have the Glaive Prime. This is literally just here so that when the Acolyte spawns, even though you can just melt them with the Sado, because it's really good for that, just do that. And especially if you have Toxic Lash procced, you're getting the double damage bonus. So right now I'm at 45. If I was max stacked at Molt Augmented, I don't know what I'd be at. But this is a very, very good build. So why don't I go hop into the Steel Path and show you. Here we are on Mott, the Steel Path, in the Void, my favorite testing spot. Now, the one thing I forgot to go over is actually what focus school do you want to use? As you can see here, I'm on Xeneric. This is purely for energy gain. You actually don't need this because if you have Arcane Energize, you'll be totally fine with energy on this build, even though you are spamming a lot. You could use Vazarin for more protection. You could use Matarai if you want. Honestly, it's really up to you, so go with whatever you'd like. This build is not necessary to use a focus school with, although Matarai and Xeneric are good options. So I'm just going to start here, proc my Toxic Lash. Let's get spores onto this enemy. Okay, that didn't spread very well, so let's get over here. Okay, Miasma for the stun. Breach Surge goes out. All these enemies are blinded. Let's Breach Surge again to reset that shield gate. Let's cast Miasma for another stun. Right now, we are just wanting to let our Breach Surge and Spores combo build up. Our damage will start to get pretty ridiculous once it has. You also can cast Miasma for your shield gate, but Breach Surge is the cheaper option that also does CC enemies a little bit. And then Rolling Guard is there just for safety. But right now we're just kind of waiting for our spores to build up, so I'll get back to you when that happens. Okay, so my spores are building up pretty nice, but as y'all can see probably, I don't even have a companion on right now. So like, you know, some cadence to the build's real strength. I don't have a companion on right now. I know it was just a Vulpaphyla that would be spreading more viral, but a companion is a companion. And yeah, like, it is just it's just a strong build in general. Like, you know, there's not much to really, like, worry about with it. Anytime that you're, like, you lose your shields, you just cast Breach Surge, which blinds everything near you. And makes, you know, you're getting a lot of status on the enemies too, which means you don't even really need to use the glaive on the Sado. But it's just, like, there to use it, I guess, if you want. And if I, like, look at that. Woo! Let's get it. Let's go hit it on this group of enemies. Boom. That is just such a ridiculous nuke. That is going to do it for this video, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this Saren rundown. Saren is one of the most popular frames, and she's actually one of, like, the most expensive plat-wise. Before she came back in Prime Resurgence, I remember I bought her back in August for, like, 300 plat. But, yeah. So, I went through a couple of variations on this build, actually, and one of them being, let me just get rid of that, a Rest and Rage version, specifically using Rest and the Common Frenzy augment to spread, like, crazy CC on enemies, and it actually worked pretty well, but what it wasn't doing was giving me that really, really good survivability. You have to use more aggro mods on that, and you can't really run any efficiency because it's already so cheap compared to Breach Surge, and the great thing about Breach Surge is that it self-procs with the way that it functions off the damage tick, sending out those sparks, and then, you know, you multiply your damage by 4, which then gets multiplied by 2, and you're doing 8x damage on your spores in radiation damage, which is another version of a CC. It's like, it's really good, and I honestly, like, I might be playing a lot more Saryn now. I barely really ever touch her, but this build is just so fun. So, yeah. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. My Fenmore video did really well, so I was planning on putting out a Felarx one today, but I'm going to save that for tomorrow as I threw another Forma in my Felarx and, well, yeah, decided to do this instead. But again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.